What was your why are you booing me in right moment? Story 1, I was working on a team of people building a race car. I told them a part that was technically strong enough should be built heavier to handle shock loads from bad track conditions. I got told I was a moron, and it would be fine someone else ran the numbers, and it would be fine. So I built the parts, put them on the car, and lo, and behold, it broke, and the car ended up on its roof. You'd think that would be validation of my opinion, and people would agree that I was right. Not how it happened. I was because I built them, so it was my fault. Story 2, in second grade, I joined a robotics club. One day we were learning about how an animal's bones affect the way animals move, and the teacher asked, give me examples about animals with spines. I said snakes. She said snakes are like worms and lack spines. Story 3, I've had many booed moments, but this is a more recent one. In my science class, we were watching a few documentaries about the U.S. space program, and the topic of pollution came up with fuel consumption, and in the midst someone asked about where the parts of the rocket go once they are abandoned by the spacecraft. I commented how it just falls, and NASA pretty much just hoped that it didn't fall on people. One of the reasons they launch out of Florida or a Cape is so the parts end up in the water and not hitting civilization. But nobody believed me, since it would be then that NASA is polluting the ocean. Story 4, in kindergarten, I drew a picture of grapes and colored them green, and the other kids and the teacher caretaker were saying there are no green grapes, only purple. Story 5, a professor in undergrad asked what the orbit speed of the space shuttle is. I volunteered 18,000 miles per hour at 17, 5 kmph, and he laughed and said absolutely not, and compared it to the speed of an airliner 500 miles per hour. Idiot. When I was in first grade, I said that electricity can be gained via water hydropower. Everyone started laughing at me until my teacher said he is right. The whole class went silent. Story 6, grade 7, Canada. We were learning about medieval Japan in social studies class, basically history class. I made a comment that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. A kid said it was the Germans, and some people backed him up. Teacher said she forgot who bombed Pearl Harbor, but it wasn't the Japanese if only smartphones existed back then. Story 7, a teacher in biology GCSE was discussing a food pyramid of a river habitat, and she claimed that 10 spray were at the top of the food chain. I pointed out, Miss, I think it says 1 osprey. She snarled and said, fine, everyone, Anon thinks he knows better than me. So now, it's 1 spray? The whole class groaned and were muttering as they had to cross out what they'd written and rewrite it, and people on my table were giving me evils and telling me to be quiet. Utterly ridiculous that I even passed that subject. Story 8 was working for a political org during election year. Got a file from another office, and they wanted me to run my standard scripts to get them a final direct mail address file. Asked the other office if they wanted me to correct any of the addresses, and they told me to absolutely not change any of their data, because it was good. Told them that I really felt like their data needed to be checked, and was told by their office, their management, and my management that I should just do as I'm told. In the end, apartment building offices throughout the state received several hundreds of pieces of direct mail from the org. I knew their file didn't have apartment numbers listed for anybody, but I wasn't allowed to change it. Story 9, that concentration camps and extermination camps weren't the same thing under the Nazis. Americans liberated concentration camps, but never an extermination camp, as extermination camps were all in the East. I guess that really pissed off a lot of people when I said it. Story 10, I got downvoted like crazy for saying that a nurse told me that cold water and soap kills germs just as well as hot water when washing your hands. Linked some sources and everything. Then people started calling me a troll. Story 11, me, in science class at middle school, saying that water expands when it's heated up, and everyone, including my science teacher, saying I was wrong, and that water only expands when it freezes and becomes ice. Story 12, my class didn't believe me, teacher included, but he admitted later that he was wrong when I said that a third 13 of the English language come from Normandic French. Another time when I said that the wireless communication protocol's name, Bluetooth, come from a king of Denmark that was called Bluetooth them. I was right all along. CME telling grade 11 university high school students it's not unrealistic to know basic conversion factors, i.e. 1 chem 1000 m. Edit, I should clarify, which is going to make this that much worse. This is in Canada, where the metric system is a thing. Story 13, 8th grade, science class. Teacher was trying to be tricky, or some, I guess, gave us a word problem that was something like if you dig a hole 3 by 3 by 4 in the ground, how much dirt is in the hole? I raised my hand and said, nothing, there was no dirt in the hole. Her specific question was how much dirt was in the hole, not how big the hole was or what was left. I gave the right answer. There was no dirt in the hole. She told me I was wrong. I pondered her answer, decided it didn't make sense, then raised my hand again. I was a studious nerd back then. I actually wanted to impress the teacher. I gave the same answer and my reasoning. She said, how much dirt? No, she told me I was wrong and stopped putting my hand up. The answer air. There was air in the whole air. I'm still pissed. It's 30 years later, but I've still not forgiven her for embarrassing me and being wrong. My daughter had a teacher in 3rd grade that told her that Swedish pancakes were really just crepes. She had no idea what to do since her teacher told her something that she eats all the time wasn't what her parents told her it was. Her next project about a week later was about other cultures, so I had her do a report on Sweden. Guess what was included in that report, and guess what she brought to class to share with everyone during her report out to class. Teacher said nothing, but did give her an edit. Hey, race the difference. Story 14, I loved maps. And the first time I spotted Iceland, my classmates disagreed when I called it Iceland, and they say that it's called AI land. They dismissed me and wouldn't even look, still remember it to this day. Edit, I told them there exists a country called Iceland. They keep shutting me down and say it's AI land island. Story 15, not myself, but my brother had a high point question on a test in 8th grade about the eventual fate of our sun. A question that he happened to know the correct answer to because he had been watching the cosmos with my dad, and they had explicitly talked about the sun's life and death during the episode, writing in detail about how it will swell up to a red giant, likely gobble up the earth, eventually shrink down to a white dwarf. He confidently wrote down the answer, and his teacher marked it wrong, and the question was worth enough points it knocked him down a letter grade. Why? Well, when we went to talk to her, wanted to find out why he got it wrong, and possibly see if he could at least get some points. It was because the science book of all things had the information all wrong, and she graded completely off the science book. Even after arguing with her, she wouldn't hear it. The grade was the grade. For some reason, the science book in question outlined a situation that didn't make any sense with our as of 2012 information. I'm not sure if it was just because the science book was out of date, or it was just filled with wrong information. But the second my brother realized it was in the book, it absolutely incensed him. I wish I could tell you exactly what he got wrong, but it's been 7 years at this point, so the memory of him retelling me is fuzzy. I want to say it skipped the red giant phase of the sun, but it's been years. Anyone who gets knocked down a whole letter grade for a right answer would be pissed. There's a happy ending to this story, though they had an assignment where they had an essay of their choice. So long as it was pertaining to what they learned might have been extra credit. Again, details are fuzzy. And petty my brother can be, he wrote his essay wholly on why he was right and the book was wrong, citing to the astrophysicists in the cosmos and Stephen Hawking, among other renowned studies and scientists. After that, the teacher went and actually finally reversed the grade. Story 16, when my grandmother fell over last month, she was told at her age having her hip broken this bad would require surgery. We were all in a room. My mother said she can't have surgery. She'll die. I instantly say better off early than stretching out. Grandma laughed. Nobody else did. Story 17, 4th grade. We had our first laboratory class, and we were learning about the lab instruments and basic safety. We were divided in around 4 tables with 6 students each, and each table had a flask with colored water in it. The teacher told us to by turns each one grab the flask and pretend to mix the liquid by spinning it. The first kid in my table grabs the flask, but in a way that his hand covers the flask's mouth. I tell him such, and that he should grab it by the neck sides instead of the mouth, because if it was acid it could splash to his palm and hurt him. The other kids at my table started calling me a crybaby, saying that it obviously isn't acid, and that it was only colored water like the one they use in my juice. And they all proceed to hold and mix it improperly. Eventually, the teacher teaches us the correct way to hold flasks, and mix them after seeing everyone grab them incorrectly. He tells us to grab them by the neck sides, just like I said, and to not cover the mouth with our hands, because if it was real acid, we could get seriously hurt, just like I said. I still get a bit salty when remembering that. Story 18 on our personal finance. An 18-year-old was asking if they should take out a $50K student loan. They didn't need it to pay for college parents paying, but interest was 1. Everyone was saying that he should take the loan and invest it, since the market typically returns well above 1, and they can make money on it. I got downvoted to for saying that at age 18, they have no clue if they will be responsible with that kind of money, and there's a big risk that they will end up spending a lot of it on things they don't need. People tore me apart for thinking that someone shouldn't make a great business decision for psychological reasons. But I saw plenty of people in college make the mistakes that I mentioned. Better to avoid the debt if they can. Edit, a couple people have asked about the legality of taking a student loan and investing it. This student was not based in the U.S., one of the Scandinavian countries, if I recall correctly, and I know that even in the U.S. it is possible. Some of my grad school loans were designed to cover my living expenses, so the money was just deposited in my account, though way less than $50K. The only thing stopping me from investing it was not being able to afford to. Story 19, when I was in 8th grade, I made the apparently controversial statement that the number 2 is 23 of number 3. I had 5 people try and convince me otherwise by doing long division on the board and saying, see, it's not 23, it's 0, 66 repeating, bunch of mouth breathers, edit fixing autocorrect mistakes. Story 20, Sunday dinner at my aunt's house, and my cousin made chicken, and she asked everyone for their honest opinion on it, and everyone's saying it's great, and this and that. And she gets to me and says, what do you think, you Fulton Holmes? And I said, it's a little undercooked, but it'll live, and everyone was pissed. Wow, a little rude there, really, etc. And like you asked me for my honest opinion, and she said, yeah, well, you didn't have to be in him thinking, no, she didn't just call me in front of everybody. I said I was half joking, and my uncle put his hand on my shoulder and said, just stop, it was awkward the rest of the night. SMH. Story 21, when I suggested in high school that the science fair should be voluntary and not mandatory, since 90 of the people in the class do their projects at the last minute with their parents doing almost all of it. The teachers and my classmates told me I was wrong and how valuable the science fair was. Lo and behold, the day the projects were due, literally everyone was complaining as to why it was mandatory, since they did their projects at the last minute with their parents doing all of the work. Story 22, I recently decided to retire from a somewhat dangerous profession in order to better look after my mental health. But a lot of people didn't like it and thought I owed it to them to keep working. Story 23, over the summer before 2nd grade, my father took me to the Detroit Historical Museum, where I learned that Detroit, like Chicago, had a huge fire that destroyed much of the city. The first day or so of class, we had to tell everyone what we did during the summer. I shared that we went to the museum and I learned about the fire in Detroit. The teacher told me that it was Chicago that had the fire, and I was wrong. As a 2nd grader, I didn't know how to handle an adult being wrong, so I started crying in front of the class. Later that day at recess, some of the kids were teasing me for crying, so I hit one of them pretty hard. I got in trouble for starting a fight and was sent to the office. Things spiral from there, and that is how I got 5 to 7 on an Alabama chain gang. I was right, though. Story 24 years ago, when I was in middle school, 2 mentally challenged kids got into a fight in class. Wasn't like a full-out fight, mostly pushing, but they definitely got into it with each other. Turns out kids heard about this, and they egged them on so that they would fight outside during lunch. I somehow found out about it, and when I got there, the 2 kids started to have a full-on fist fight. As all the kids surrounding them cheered, I rushed in to break them up. It was difficult breaking it up because the 2 kids really were going after each other, and no one else really helped to break it up. Eventually, teachers caught wind and broke it up. As they did, kids started to literally boo me and curse at me for breaking up the spectacle. I was shocked. Don't get me wrong, I'm not some white knight, and I totally get it that when you're a kid, you love watching fights. Heck, even as adults, we have some primitive innate entertainment by watching people duke it out. But there was something incredibly wrong about watching 2 mentally challenged kids being egged on to fight to the amusement of kids who were laughing at the situation. Story 25, once in middle school, the teacher said that carnivore dinosaurs like the T-Rex appeared in the Jurassic era. Then I said that the T-Rex was actually from the Cretaceous period. The teacher and some students said that I was wrong because it's called Jurassic Park, and on the next day, I brought some sources from the internet that agreed with me, and the teacher corrected herself after doing some quick search on her own, but that didn't stop me from getting nicknamed Dinosaur in class. Story 26, I'm going to start this off by saying I'm terrible at most sports. Something I'm good at, though, is tactics. Anyways, I live in a country that is not famed for baseball. In fact, baseball isn't really all that known here, but for some reason, my high school continues to this day to include baseball in its curriculum. Safe to say, none of the teachers or students had anything but a basic grasp of the game. However, thanks mostly to my granddad, people in my family actually played and coached baseball at points in their lives. And although ID never really played, I knew how the game worked. But there is one moment that stands out. My class was playing baseball, and I was chosen to be the pitcher. Now, I can't throw very well, but I managed to strike out 3 people in the first inning, which I thought was pretty good considering we were losing, while my friends thought otherwise and told I was cheating. They got the teacher involved, and I was banned from pitching for the rest of the match. I still don't understand. Story 27, am an absolutely idiot, but I do have brief moments of intelligence, I swear. And one of them was my 3rd grade teacher tried to teach us fractions literally using the Monty Hall problem and jelly beans, and kept shaming me when I got it right. The Monty Hall problem is a bit of a mindfuck, but it's essentially this: if you're on a game show with 3 doors, 2 of which have a goat behind it, and 1 of which had a car, picking it right the first time has odds of 13. If the host opens one of the doors revealing one of the goats and asks if you want to switch your door pick, staying with your original door has odds 13, but switching is 12, shifting the entire equation. This is a mindfuck, but it's true, and I found out later that teacher kept making fun of me for saying it, when weirdly, I was actually right. Going to haunt me forever. 2 quick edits. 1, it's 23 RDS, not 1/3. I remain an idiot. 2, the teacher didn't intentionally use the Monty Hall problem. They did it by accident by having jelly beans under paper cups, and would show us an empty paper cup to change the fraction to what she claimed would be 12 to 12. She was wrong, and weirdly enough, I was right, but she kept me up in front of the class to use me as an example of getting it wrong. Story 28, 8th grade. Entire class against me, saying blood is blue until it oxidizes and turns red. Teacher came in and literally asked, "Are you all retarded? Blood is red, inside outside. Want to see my colonoscopy video? Vindicated MP3. Story 29, I was once in a chorus in my community college, and they had interesting social dynamics. It was primarily older white women who were the alphas of the group. So we were doing a Latin American carol called Vamos Pastorcitos, and there was debate between them about the pronunciation of C. I said the soft C is pronounced like an S. An old lady in the group said it was pronounced like the CH in cheese. I said, "You're thinking of Italian. In Spanish, it's pronounced as an S, or in many European Spanish dialects, like a TH." The choral conductor went with her churchy old lady friend, and they all pronounced it like Vamos Pastorcitos. It still haunts me to this day. Story 30, my friend thinks that the Voyage 1 is outside our galaxy. Just because it's an interstellar space, he thinks that means outside the galaxy. Even after I showed him on Google, he still says he's right and got his friend to try to intimidate me all because he thinks he knows everything about space. Story 31, class discussion on gay marriage in a sociology class in college. Circa 2003, I stated the scientific fact that homosexuality has been observed in over 1,500 species and basically got booed, laughed at. Story 32, a chemistry teacher in high school once very solemnly warned students of the dangers of dihydrogen monoxide. My dad had told me this joke before, so I knew where it was going. While she was going on about how it causes flooding, thousands of annual deaths, and has even leaked into the water supply in high enough doses it's poisonous, I started cracking up in the back. Literally everyone in class looked at me like I was a sadist, and one girl asked real seriously, "Why are you laughing?" until the teacher started laughing too. She had me come to the front of the class and write out the chemical formula for the whole class, where they learned that dihydrogen monoxide, H2O water. Also, got into an argument with a kid in the 6th grade that 100 times 100 was 10,000 and not, in fact, 1,000. When I put on a calculator, he said the calculator was wrong. Then we asked a custodian passing by, and she agreed with him that 100, 100, 100. Story 33, grade 12 law class. Trying to convince everyone in my class, except one other person, that cannabis had never killed anyone and would probably be legal within the next 15 years. I don't know what the deal was since almost everyone in the class smoked weed, but none of that matters because I live in Canada and weed was legalized within the next 15 years. So Story 34, in 5th grade, we have a problem on math class with mirroring images. It asked if you're driving a car and look in the rearview mirror, how would you see the ambulance emblem if an ambulance car was driving behind you? I said you would see ambulance because at least in my country those signs are intentionally put on mirrored, so you can see it normally in a mirror. Everyone said I was stupid, even the teacher. I still remember it after 8 years. Story 35, I pointed out that Australia doesn't have free speech. In another subreddit, I got downvoted for it, and only after people said I was right, the balance kind of restored. Story 36, I've worked in technical support for over 20 years. It happens to me on a weekly basis. Usually it's the network admins trying to prove me wrong. They're the biggest divas in the IT industry. Yes, your precious network is misconfigured. No, I don't care how many certifications you have. Story 37, the question in history class was who sacked Rome, and I raised my hand and answered the Visigoths. Everyone laughed along the lines of, "That's a ridiculous name. There's no such thing as the Visigoths," and that the Vandals sacked Rome, which is where we get the word vandalism from. While yes, the Vandals did sack Rome, so did the Visigoths in the year 410. Story 38, just the other day, there was a thread about what do people get wrong about exercise. I said that cardio is not about burning calories. It's about depleting sugar from your liver, so no new fat is created. When you eat, the liver processes the calories into either energy or fat storage. When you exercise, the body uses sugars from the liver for quick energy. This is why marathon runners carb load before a race. But even if you're not running a marathon, the principle still works. Do half an hour of cardio a day. Deplete the liver, and no new fat will be created. Then, when you're just sitting around, there's no sugar in the liver, so the body has to break down existing fat for energy, hence you lose weight, but the myth is that you eat X number of calories, and then you have to do X number of hours of cardio to burn those calories off. That's not how metabolism works. I even provided links from an endocrinologist explaining it. I mean, I agree exercise makes you lose weight, and binge eating sabotages the process, but it's not about burning calories. It's about depleting the liver of glucose. Of course, people don't like reading anything that challenges their pre-existing beliefs. So I had some guy calling me and etc. I politely explained, just because you disagree doesn't mean I'm automatically wrong. Edit, so all told, I got around 70 downvotes in the replies to this. Not sure if that proves the point about booing, but one thing's for sure, I do have to stop arguing with people. Even if you're essentially correct, it makes you look like an apparently. Overall, people like this original comment. I should have just said nothing in reply to the people booing. Silly me. Story 39, Patrick Stewart, being heterosexual and married. It was a stupid argument in the first place because who the cares? It is Sir Professor Picard, and how he spent his nights is his own business. I have zero issue with homosexuality, and the whole thing had me sounding seriously homophobic, which pissed me off even more. It began as an insult as well. A group discussion at work turned to a collective theme for Halloween costumes. The X-Men were tossed out with Randy as Professor X. Nothing against him. He is tall, a full beard, and full head of hair. I, on the other hand, am short, bald, and wear a suit every day. People already call me Professor X or Lex Luthor if I say something snarky. I slowly raise my hand and suggest I might be better suited. A woman I already detested says, with a snort of disgust and a face that looks like she smelled her own, "Oh my God, no. No offense," she says offensively. "He's my crush, and I don't want that ruined thinking of you. Prepare to drop it and drop participating with him at all." She goes on, "I mean, he's gay, so I have no chance, but still." And then she does a mock shudder and yuck sound. Mega. You're right about not having a shot. I couldn't resist saying, but that has nothing to do with his orientation. He's straight. I rolling ensued with her lackeys joining in about how everyone knows Patrick is gay. This included a gay man looking slightly uncomfortable. This was a while back, so I'm not sure which wife he was on. I pointed out he's had a few marriages with the age gap increasing between them, then got serious with me being accused of being bigoted and anti-gay. All I could say was look it up. She later complained to my boss how offensive I had been and tried to register a discrimination claim. After explaining to him who Patrick Stewart was, he was genuinely puzzled. Trying not to offend her, he tried to get to how my saying actor was not gay was somehow discriminatory to her. She wouldn't drop it. So there was a meeting when I answered to a post about guns saying that the most probable person murdering you with a firearm is yourself. 2/3 of firearm-related gun deaths are suicides. These are just numbers. Story 40, well, if I was just getting booed, I was having an easy night, and it was every Friday night from spring to fall. I've told this before in the past, but it'll give the most condensed version I can for now. To start off, I drag race. Been racing since I was 13, and am 33 now. In my mid-20s, I used to do these 100 feet drags held at a local circle track. In the area, there's about 2 to 3 circle tracks within 45 minutes of each other, and the closest drag strip is over 2 to 12 hours away and in another state. So not really anyone knows what they're doing and only know what they saw on TV on Street Outlaws and whatnot. This includes the organizer and promoters of these races, yet it's a bracket race, which is a handicap form of drag racing, where it's more about consistency and driver skill than whoever has the faster car. Basically, you can race your daily driver and have the same chance of winning as someone who's built a hot rod. Over the course of 5 to 6 years, I raced my street car for fun and got a reputation for winning almost every week and winning the championship each year. This did not sit well with the fans that came out to watch BC. Nobody expects a bone stock 07 Chevy Cobalt to win in a drag race versus anything. So naturally, everyone thought I was cheating and I'd get booed every night. I could write stories about PPL booing me, threatening me, throwing stuff at me, confronting me at the track, and in public wishing to do me harm. The organization made a rule directed at me to make it illegal to hit the brakes just in my class before the finish line in hopes it would mess me up. It didn't. I eventually got sick of it and stopped going and moved away from the area since then, but they stopped doing the races not long after that anyways. Story 41, I made a middle school class presentation on the crane fly and stated that they aren't mosquito eaters or tiger mosquitoes that eat regular mosquitoes, and I got a lot of angry outbursts because apparently a large amount of parents tell their little kids that so they don't freak out about crane flies being nearby. Story 42, I said on a thread a few weeks ago that you should be cautious of what you see and believe on Reddit when it comes to matters concerning the Chinese because China has invested so much in it. I was downvoted to oblivion and got an angry comment. Is this what Jesus felt like? Story 43, it was the first university lecture of pathogens and pathogenicity. Beginning with epidemiology, one of my favorite areas, there's a bit of QA at the beginning on what different transmission vectors and factors there are. I'd been answering a couple, and another I said was religious practices. An atrium of at least 200 students chuckled and laughed at me, except my housemate next to me who was on the same wavelength, and the lecturer. The lecturer shows the next slide, lo and behold, in big bold letters at the top of the slide, religion can influence parasite transmission. Negliria fowleri, stunned silence, except for me. I let out the heartiest laugh I have in a long time. Y'all can eat my class of 2019. Story 44, I had hate crime charges brought against me by a professor at my college because I wrote an op-ed in the school newspaper talking about how Rick Santorum, this was many years ago, he was just starting to get famous, and his brand of dominionism was both anti-Christian and anti-American. Nothing actually happened to me, but reading his angry emails to our editor and faculty advisor, though he never once contacted me directly, had me a bit spooked because power structures be crazy, yo. Story 45, I was on a canoe trip and had spent the first half of the day paddling down the river at a grueling pace. It was a mid-afternoon, and a lean-to site along the river was spotted and empty. Keep in mind, this was a fairly large canoe trip group, about 35 people. We had tents, but these tents could only accommodate about 20 people, so a lean-to was needed to accommodate the rest. Dark clouds were beginning to fill the sky, and I called out that it was a good idea to make camp at the lean-to site, but the cocky trip leader demanded we push on, and so did everyone else. I still tried to push my proposal, but it never got far. The next lean-to site was another 4 miles upriver, for very tough miles upstream. A massive thunderstorm came down upon us, and we got drenched before collapsing at the lean-to site that evening, unfed too. The lean-to site was already occupied by another camping group, and it was impossible to build a fire as all that was wet. So the entire group had to eat dehydrated spaghetti and meatballs cold and try to keep warm. I was forced to sleep outside with about 14 others in the rain. Adding to the troubles, upon waking up, one of the tents got crushed by a fallen tree limb and broke the leg of a group member. The pickup destination was still another 16 miles away, so the entire grueling day was spent paddling toward the pickup destination while it still rained and while my canoe leaked badly after crashing into some rocks. All because of that stupid trip leader. Story 46, when I told some early 20-ish girl that her concern about finding friends and in a broad student program was not the problem of her physics prof, but rather her own to solve 5 people gang up on me for being OO. Story 47, my mother was on a jury for a welfare fraud case where this woman was collecting payments under different names, and the whole thing was pretty much an open-shut case. Except she was the only juror who voted guilty, since the rest of them were voting not guilty. They were on her side because she was sticking it to the man. She actually had to point out to these dumb that welfare money came from taxes, therefore they were the ones getting screwed since taxes are deducted from their income. Even the judge presiding over the case was shaking his head in disbelief of how stupid these people were. Luckily, they all agreed, and I think she got the maximum sentence. Story 48, whenever I tell people how the AR-15 in most configurations is not an assault rifle, because it is not capable of automatic fire. The ones that are cost upwards of $20,000 and require full NFA paperwork, a process which takes 6 to 18 months for the ATF to complete. Also, that assault weapon is a meaningless term that has no practical impact on firearms and will do absolutely nothing. This is the former weapons instructor of the San Jose PD explaining the difference between an assault rifle full auto and a semi-automatic sporting rifle. Even if you were dead set in your mind, watch the video, please. If nothing else, you will be better informed about the differences. The video is purely educational. The video. Story 49, guy at a party talks about how he watched a guy roofie a girl and didn't stop it from happening. He even made eye contact with the other guy, who signed shish. He laughed about it and said it wasn't his business. I then proclaimed how he could let that happen. The entire party looked at me like I was crazy and ushered me to another part of the house. I yelled at everyone, watch your drinks. Let guys rape you. I mentioned on a Facebook thread that addiction is a disease and that a lot of people in this day and age started heroin after being prescribed painkillers for an injury. I also mentioned that addiction is a public health issue and not a morality issue, since people from all backgrounds are affected by it. That went about as well as you'd expect. Edit formatting. Story 50, on a different subreddit. I made a comment that said males and females react differently to different medicines' anesthesia, and I was downvoted and told I was wrong. That the only deciding factor for medication anesthesia dose is body mass. I produced a link to a medical journal proving I was right, that with anesthesia like morphine, males require 40 more since the opioid receptors in their brains are less sensitive to it. My comment with the link was removed by a mod. Story 51, I received dozens of downvotes for saying it is highly probable that you owe your existence to one of you ancestors raping one of your other ancestors at some point in time. Story 52, my boyfriend is in his 20s and he and his roommate tried to argue with me that they didn't need a trash bin in the kitchen. They had garbage bags, so what could a bin hold them in? Now they use their bin all the time. Story 53, in grade 7, when I said Czechoslovakia wasn't a country anymore. This stupid teacher and most of my classmates thought I was stupid because of this one inaccurate online map from the 1980s said there still was Czechoslovakia. Story 54, English class, sophomore or junior year, said a very eloquent and interesting point of symbolism in the book we were reading. Popular girl booed me down, and everyone agreed with her. Next week, she said the very same thing I did, and everyone cheered and praised her for her intelligence. Story 55, for context, I've got a half-decent goatee with some neck beard going on, and the cheekbones of a Guy Fawkes mask. Anyway, one time this short, kind of baby-faced guy told me he thought I looked like a child molester. I told him he looks like a child.